Commitment 2025 coverage. Good evening, everyone. I'm Erin Clark.
Proposition 50 appears to be passing. Governor Newsom is meeting with the media right now. Let's go there live, get his comments on what appears to be a big win for the Yes on Prop 50 crowd.
For the people of this country and the principles that our founding fathers lived and died for. And so we're proud. We're proud here in California to be part of this narrative this evening. We're proud of the work that the people of the state of California did tonight to send a powerful message to an historic president. Donald Trump is an historic president. He is the most historically unpopular president in modern history. In every critical category, Donald Trump is underwater. He promised to make us healthier. He promised to make us wealthier. We're sicker and poorer. And he fundamentally understands that. Why else would he call Greg Abbott saying he's entitled to 5 seats? Why else is he trying to rig the midterm elections before one single vote is even cast? He understands his position at this moment in the United States of America. One thing he never counted on, though, was the state of California. Instead of agonizing over the state of our nation, we organized in an unprecedented way in a 90-day sprint. People from all over the United States of America contributed their voices and their support for this initiative. We stood tall and we stood firm in response to Donald Trump's recklessness. And tonight, after poking the bear, this bear roared with an unprecedented turnout in a special election with an extraordinary result. None of us, however, are naive. This is a pattern. This is a practice. Donald Trump's efforts to rig the midterm election continue to this day. And I'll reinforce that in just a moment. You're seeing him take action all across this country, not just in Texas. You saw what they were successful able to do in Missouri, what they did in North Carolina, what they're trying to do in Indiana, and inevitably in Florida. They are not screwing around. In June of this year, we saw 4,000 National Guard federalized in the state of California. We saw 700 active duty Marines not sent overseas, but sent to the second largest city in the United States of America to militarize our streets. We said in June this was a preview of things to come. What more evidence do you need than what happened in Washington, D.C., what's happening up in Portland, cities like Chicago? When we kicked off this campaign just 90 or so days ago in Little Tokyo, in Southern California, in LA, at the Democracy Center, Donald Trump sent Greg Bovino. He sent his private police force that increasingly appears to have taken an oath of office to Donald Trump, not to the Constitution of the United States. He sent them to our kickoff rally to chill free expression, to chill free speech, to intimidate people from participating. Just today, in Los Angeles, Donald Trump called up the Border Patrol, sent them to Dodger Stadium, and threw a fastball at free speech, right at the head, free expression, to suppress the vote in America's second largest city. Just did that today. People in tactical gears sent out to intimidate a community that is already on edge. But you see, as we speak, people are still in line. People waiting up 3 hours to cast their vote, to send a message to Donald Trump. No crowns, no thrones, no kings. That's what this victory represents. It's a victory for the people of the state of California and the United States of America. And this is a victory that's punctuated with a sober reminder that it's not just the actions that Donald Trump has taken to federalize our Guard, to begin the process of militarizing American cities, to intimidate free expression and speech by utilizing ICE and Border Patrol in America's cities. But he also announced today, right when polls were opening, that this election was rigged. That this election was rigged. Of course, those are familiar words. It's exactly what Donald Trump said after January 6th, that day of love, where he tried to light democracy on fire. He tried to wreck this country, and he called in to the Secretary of State in Georgia, calling up for 11, 12,000 votes, just like he called Greg Abbott, saying he's entitled to those 5 seats. He said this election was rigged, and he's moving to look for criminal prosecution and investigations at the Department of Justice. He is not screwing around. So tonight, I'm proud, but I'm very mindful and sober of the moment we are living in. Donald Trump does not believe in fair and free elections. Period and full stop. This is not complicated, and it's self-evident to anyone paying attention. You start to stack up all of these actions that continue to this moment and will continue in moments.
Governor Newsom from Sacramento responding to the totals coming in as Prop 50 has been declared passed in California by a number of news organizations by a tune of almost 2-1. Those are the latest numbers.
Okay, on the Central Coast, we are following just 2 local races. Both of those are in the city of Santa Cruz. Measure B and C are competing housing measures.
Both creating property taxes, and both would have money go to affordable housing and homeless services. Different tax levels and scopes, though, between B and C.
So Measure B was authored by a group of real estate agents. It has a lower tax level than Measure C and also allows for some of the spending to be used for roads in the Santa Cruz Wharf.
And right now, that is passing Measure C, written by housing advocates, Mayor Fred Keeley, and nonprofits. Larger tax hike and limits spending to only affordable housing and homeless services. That one is very close. We will continue to follow these.
We will continue to follow these and have more online and on air. We'll be back with the latest from across the country and the Central Coast on Action News 8 at 11.